Dalton Schultz says he's used to the offensive philosophy. Others were not. That explains a lot about the troubles of the 2025 season. Is that on the quarterback or more so on the offensive play caller?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Red Nation from H-Town to your town. Today's episode and every episode of the Locked On Texans podcast is for Texan fans all around. We are really in that time of the year where there's no more football, right? We're transitioning into the off season, but I think it's important to kind of look at what happened in 2025. That's going to be a conversation until we get more Texans football, right? And because of that conversation, it's important to highlight the struggles and how Houston can improve, or the struggles and how Houston kind of fail themselves in maybe certain areas. So I want to kind of talk about my thoughts on Dalton Schultz's recent comments about, he understood the offensive philosophy. He was used to it. Others were not. And also, as we reflect on 2025 and get ready for 2026, the offseason conversation is going to be centered around getting more playmakers in the building, right? Houston will get Tank Dell back at some point, but the conversation centered around Joe Mixon still seems up in the air. And from a general manager standpoint, from Nick Caserio, he sounds more committal on Tank than he does on Joe Mixon. Also, the Houston Texans keep Dino Vasso, their cornerbacks coach, are going to give him a promotion. He was up for a defensive coordinator roles across the league. I'm going to tell you guys something. Keeping Dino means a lot, right? We talk about the defense being intact. He's a reason why. Shout out to my everydayers from the Himalayas for making the Locked On Texan podcast your first listen of the day. If you're being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Dalton Schultz has been on a media tour as of late. He's been everywhere, right? He recently spoke on Kamari Lassiter and Jalen Petrie being psychopaths, highlighting the physicality that the defense plays with. Something I really hope the team can figure out to get on the offensive side of the ball. But something that stood out to me, it was on the Ron Hughley and Clint Sterner show on 610 Sports Radio here in Houston, where he mentioned how he fit into Kaylee's offense. And he mentioned it's a new offense, but it's stuff I've been doing my whole career. I do feel like I was ahead of the curve than anybody else. He continued it. I see the coverage. I know the read where I'm sitting. And CJ has a lot of trust in me over the last 3 years, knowing where I'm going to be. He also highlighted other receivers, struggled to get on the same page in the new offense, which led to miscommunication with CJ Stroud. I think this puts into perspective the struggles of the year from the wide receiver unit. And also for the tight ends that they brought in, like Cade Stover. You look at his first 2 years, hampered by injury, not being able to be out there. He's not an all-world tight end coming out of college. And so you say things like with the Texans offense, miss Brevin Jordan. I get it. Brevin Jordan's aura, as the young folks like to say. But, when we talk about Brevin Jordan, we go back to one moment, essentially, that's the playoff moment against the Cleveland Browns. But he does have a lot of chemistry with the quarterbacks here in Houston, which I think Cade Stover lacks. Obviously, when you get to signing guys off the street, they're going to lack that as well. But again, when we look at the wide receivers and how, Houston had to lean on the vets over the young guys, I think this plays directly into that. More so while the offense seems so disjointed and out of whack throughout the year. I think this is why we saw more turnover-worthy plays pre-injury than when we saw Stroud finish the season, right? We talk about taking care of the ball before going into the playoffs. I thought Stroud got better there, but I also thought the offense progressed and everybody started to get on a similar page with one another. And while we also saw issues with downfield completions for a good part of the year, I think CJ Stroud on downfield completions, an area of his game which, he said for a while, especially during that rookie year, those numbers dropped going into 2025. Let's take a look at them here. Downfield completions for CJ Stroud. On a year, CJ Stroud, 37% completion percentage. in 2025. I think this plays a big reason why. Not knowing what guys are going to be, not being comfortable in where where you trust your players to be. The Texans are also enthusiastic about keeping Nick Caley, right? He's going to return back for another year, and that's why the tone around the entire season was kind of centered around improvement. This is what some people may view a 2 to 3 year process in terms of commanding the offense. And without all of the expected tools, everybody is handcuffed. Stroud is handcuffed. The play caller and Caley is handcuffed. The offense is handcuffed. We talk about having to move guys around in the offensive line and the shuffling. That plays a part into being handcuffed as well, not knowing can this left guard and center combination pick up the stunts and twists. Will Cam Robinson be out there? Will Erstry be on the right or left side? Where will Titus Howard be? So a lot of these things that went on in 2025, you look at why the offense looks so disjointed and out of whack. It's simply because this is an offense that takes time, as to where the Shanahan system, right, that tree everybody loves, and it seems like half the league is going to have an offensive play caller or a head coach who comes directly from that system. But it's very much so step in and play, plug and play, right? Sam Darnold excelled the last 2 seasons in the Shanahan style system. Brock Purdy in his ascension. Mac Jones has had some good moments in the Shanahan system. So when you look at what that scheme does and what the Caley scheme does, and he comes from similar backgrounds from both the Patriots and the Rams, this system here in Houston seems a little bit more intricate, right? And again, everybody knows handcuff. And with Schultz saying it feels like Houston, with Schultz, saying this, it feels like Houston's offense overachieved. Think of it like this: no Tank, no Mixon, and Kirk essentially the same issues as the rookies on top of missing 4 games. Like we would sit back and talk about where are the rookies? Where are the rookies? But those guys are struggling to get adapted to the NFL and this offense, which may cause for more on their plate. That said, this offseason, OTAs, any camp, and practice, the approach has to be different compared to 2025. Remember this. Stroud asked for an offense that featured the elements of both the Rams and the Patriots, right? But not once did I see him redo reps at practice or be more commanding or be more demanding of let's get closer to perfection. Not once. At times, it seemed like he was going through the motion. Given the magnitude of this upcoming season, Stroud approach has to be more demanding. It has to be different. Every receiver needs to have that luxury that Nico and Dalton Schultz will. Now, here's a good thing, right? For Houston, you got a sample size of what Jaden Higgins could be, right? You got a mini sample size of what Jalen Noel could look like. You also know Stroud's most trusted receiver and Tank Dell is coming back. Those are 3 guys who will either A, be a part of this system for another year, so they'll be going into their second year, or B, already know Stroud and his tendencies and the spots where he needs to be and where he excels at. That's a positive. So when I look at, okay, was that on the quarterback in 2025? Was that on the play caller in 2025? I think it's a combination of both. I think throughout the year, each of those individuals, both Caley and Stroud, got better with each other, got better in learning each other and what the offense asked for. I think you look at what Caley did in terms of being able to just adapt to the offensive line issues. That helped out CJ Stroud and Davis Mills a lot, right? And moving forward, the foundation year 2025, I always thought about it like this. If Stroud wants to get to that Brady-esque level, 2025 was needed. If he goes on to have one of them type of careers, 2025 is going to be the year where we look at the fire that he went through and say, man, that was needed for him to progress and excel and then turn down a Pro Bowl and then cut his hair, right? And then, going into this offseason, what will his approach be? But I'm telling you guys right now, I want to see a much more commanding Stroud because this offense calls for it. Hey, man, I don't know where you are right now on this route. We need to be on the same page. Let's run it again. Our defense is kicking our tail right now, because of our lack of communication and being on the same page. Let's run it again. I don't need to see a lot of these reps from Davis Mills or Graham Mertz. No, we need to see more reps from the quarterback. And I'm not going to say that I think we'll see that. What I am saying is, if we do not see that, then I wouldn't be shocked if 26 looks like 25. If we do see that, then I wouldn't be shocked if 26 looks like 23. On the other side, let's talk about why there seems to be more trust in Tank Dell returning back in his role compared to Joe Mixon. I think that's going to be a fun conversation, simply based on Nick Caserio. But if you've ever hired someone who's looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is, right? You want candidates who truly match what you're looking for. Trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring? That's the question. Are you hiring? Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. Sponsored jobs boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. Instead of struggling to get your job posting, Indeed sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Welcome back, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Hey, guys, it's popping over at the Everyday Club, right? And so first, thank you for making Locked On Texans your first listen of the day and for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports network in the land. If you haven't already, go check out the new Everydayer Club, access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Texans, compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other major podcasting platforms. Go to lockedontexans.supercast.com to join or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. Really quick, before I talk about Tank Dell and Joe Mixon, David Njoku has confirmed he will not be returning to the Browns and will be looking for a new team in the 2026 season and moving forward. And we know the Houston Texans loves those 3-year deals. I think the first 4-year deal we'll see will obviously be CJ Stroud. I even think with Will Anderson, he's going to get a 3-year deal, but max dollars. So the impact of that deal in terms of guaranteed and market will be different. But back to David Njoku. A 3-year deal with Njoku would be great for Houston. I think so. But I do wonder if he'd be a fit. He comes from the Kevin Stefanski offense. There's some similarities in what Stefanski asked for compared to the rest of the Shanahan tree in the NFL, right? And so that could work out. And this is why I say that Houston does not draft tight ends well. They don't. They drafted Owen Daniels in 2006, but you look at 2014, CJ Fedorowicz in the 3rd round. The one pick that Cody and I used to get fried for when we were just didn't understand why Houston went this route in the 3rd round. In 2019, Kahele Warring, Jordan Atkins, 2018. None of that panned out for Houston. None of it. So kind of like the offensive line, it's beneficial to get a bona fide stud at tight end if the Houston Texans can. Now, granted, Katie was not here for any of those seasons. Houston drafted Luke Lachey last year. I thought that was a mistake given that his background calls for a 2 tight end set, right? And he's also a former tight end coach. But getting studs on this offense helps with the learning curve. And obviously, Houston missed one of their most trustworthy playmakers in Tank Dell. Now everybody is waiting on Tank's return. Recently, Caserio spoke about Tank has some encouraging things to say. Says they were thinking maybe there's a shot Tank Dell will return at the end of the season. That didn't happen, obviously. But he also said he'll be ready to start hopefully in April. He's probably not quite where he was, but he's trending that way. The mood and tone around Tank has been completely different than Mixon, right? For Mixon, it feels like we don't know yet. For Tank, it feels like we're up to speed and up to date, and the information that we have is current on his progress. And you have to look at how everything played out last year. The Houston Texans, in a lot of ways, whether some may view it as a good thing or a bad thing, they are a player first organization. They were even a player first organization when the quarterback wanted out several years ago, right? This is a player first organization. They honor their players here. And I think for 2025, the relationship with Joe Mixon, keeping everything disclosed in house, not leaking to the point where it became pointless to even ask a question about Joe Mixon, um, was frustrating simply because if you don't know what's going on now, how can we prepare for what's going on next? What's going to happen next? What's going to happen for the future? And the problem is right now, February 11th, early this morning, it still feels as though they don't have a clue about what Joe Mixon's future is going to look like with that mysterious foot injury. Now, compared to Tank Dell, it feels like, oh, they know where Tank Dell is. Joe Mixon hasn't been around the facility. Tank Dell has been around the facility. He's been on the field. He's been with the players. I'm sure he's been in the locker room. He's been up to date. Not to saying that Joe Mixon has lost all contact and you know, I had a conversation with the guys in the locker room, right? But with Tank Dell, it feels like the activeness of him being around showing face and making sure his body is where it needs to be seems a lot more intentional than Joe Mixon for whatever reason. I'm not speculating. I'm just saying this is how it feels. And for Nick Caserio, it feels like, well, we got two guys on the contract. We also have an offense that needs upgrades. I know where Tank Dell stands right now. Even if he's not at 100%, even if he's at 50%, 50%, knowing that he's at 50% is better than not knowing anything about what Joe Mixon is right now. And Houston doesn't. So, like, I wouldn't be shocked if we go into the 2026 season without Joe Mixon. I wouldn't be shocked at all. I don't know where the communication stands. Now, I'm sure that the front office and coach and everybody has been in some type of communication with Joe Mixon. But that's it. That's where the ball stops. It doesn't feel like, from a playing standpoint, not personal, not relation standpoint, but from a playing standpoint, it doesn't feel like Houston is 100% sure Joe Mixon will be back for 2026. And if he is back, they don't know how long it's going to take for Mixon to get to a place where he can be productive. Can't just drop Joe Mixon back in the office and expect everything to be great, right? If you haven't seen him, if you're not knowing how the workouts are going, if you're not knowing where the injury is currently and is it progressing, is it getting worse, is it at a standstill? These are all of the things where I thank God I'm not a general manager of an NFL team, because you have to take these things into account, into consideration. With Tank, though, it feels like, yeah, he's getting better each and every day. And we know where he stands. Our doctors are telling us where he stands. He's coming around. We're seeing him work out. He's getting active. He feels better to the point where maybe there's a shot he can come in and play at the end of this year. Like, that tells it all to me. When you hear we were thinking maybe there's a shot, that speaks to the level of understanding and knowing and being in the know. We never got that from Joe Mixon. Never. That's why the trust in Tank. When people say we got Tank Dell coming back, yeah, because we know he's coming back. And we know that him coming back is going to be beneficial to Kaylee. It's going to be monumental for CJ Stroud. Even if Joe Mixon came back, we know that, but we just don't know where he stands right now. That's a problem to me. You take that into consideration that Houston can move on from Joe Mixon and upgrade and save $8 million. That's the thing. Like Tank Dell is coming back. He's essential to the offense. He's a huge asset to the quarterback. He's going to be a huge asset to any offense he plays in. But his salary right now as a third round pick ain't about nothing, which is great for Houston. Amazing for Houston, right? That $8 million for Houston that they could save. Come on now. You can do something with that, especially when you know I can save $8 million and be certain about the path I need to take, or that $8 million can go into a play I'm extremely uncertain about. Now, what's not uncertain is Houston's ability to coach up players on the defensive side of the ball. A large reason of that has been due to how they put together their coaching staff. Dino Vasso, one of them guys. Let's talk about him to close out today's show. It's Wednesday, and Wednesday stands for the Winter Games, and the Winter Games are officially here. If you're playing anything, if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care about the most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. The drama. There's drama in the Winter Games. The drama of curling matches that start slow and somehow get intense fast. Hockey games that feel different right from the opening face-off. That's why the Winter Games are as fun as they are. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow the Winter Games than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Closing out today's episode, it's important to talk about the Houston Texans keeping Dino Vasso. He had opportunities around the league to potentially be a defensive coordinator, right? And that's twice this offseason where Matt Burke's name was thrown around as a player, as a coach, that can move around and maybe have an expanded role with another team, franchise in the NFL. Dino Vasso, who, listen here, man, helped get Derek Stingley to where who's an all-world cornerback, came out of college an all-world cornerback, but helped get Derek Stingley to the heights that he's at, right? To all pros. Also has helped Kamari Lassiter, who just continues to ascend, right? A lot of people I talk with, and I have a cousin who texts me all the time. And the approach to the game that Kamari has is way more favorable with a lot of people than Derek Stingley, right? Derek Stingley is much more quiet, doesn't necessarily show the passion and fiery. Kamari does, right? But you look at Dino Vasso being a huge part as to why Kamari is highly regarded around the league as one of the better young cornerbacks in the NFL. I thought he should have been an outright Pro Bowl cornerback this year and not an alternate. And I'm also looking forward to seeing what Dino could do with Jalen Reed. The Houston Texans desperately need a cornerback 3. He could be that player, outside, inside guy. He also has helped players like Jalen Petrie as well. So that's twice this season, this offseason, where you got guys that can move on, but they choose to come back. That speaks to the 3 C's the Houston Texans are building, and they have built in the building off of 16 and Kirby. Number one, the culture, right? I mean, I just think especially on the defensive side of the ball, and this speaks towards DeMeco Ryans, but the culture in which he's created, going. Like, this team was a loser culture. They had a losing culture for 3 to 4 seasons in a row, right? That's just who they were. DeMeco comes in. They win playoff games. They win 10 wins. They win AFC championship, AFC South championship divisions, right? The culture is amazing. The culture is amazing here in Houston, right? That also speaks to the importance of continuity. And it all seems like this happens for the defensive side of the ball and not the offensive side of the ball, right? But just keeping these positional coaches in the building, that helps with understanding where their guys were previous year, where they need to get better, not necessarily have to come in as a new hire and watch a bunch of film or just what you've seen during your time elsewhere, but you know the tendencies of their players in a more intimate, level, right? It also speaks to the continuity of understanding what's next, what needs to happen for the number 2 defense to be number 1, and everybody is on the same page with that, right? And I think that's important, but ultimately that speaks to chance. It feels like the coaching staff feels like they have a chance to do something the franchise has never done before. And when you buy into those 3 C's, especially when the chance is so big, you're like, wow, okay, I want to stick around for this. I don't want to be the guy that leaves before I can have my cake and eat it too. Right? And I think that's important. So shout out to Dino Vasso, a hell of a coach. Hell of a coach. I'm excited to see how he can coach up Jalen Reed, as I mentioned. I'm excited to see the new heights for Kamari Lassiter. You have to hope and pray that these players stay healthy. But for Houston to get him to return back, and I said it before last season, they better get this thing figured out and get to the pinnacle sooner than later, because they're going to lose guys. Like after the 26th season next year, I wouldn't be shocked if we don't hear Raw Wright's name in defensive coordinator conversations. I wouldn't be shocked. So Houston got a chance to do something special. But it goes back to, will Nick Caserio fulfill his role in making sure this roster is talented top to bottom, both sides of the ball? Right. Obviously, it comes down to health. Guys got to stay healthy. That's a problem that you always got to account for. So making sure you have the right depth and the players that you have, they're coached up. Right, because we saw when Jalen Reed went down and it was just Stingley and Kamari, and Stingley was dealing with the oblique injury, and they had to put in Tremont Smith, the other guys. We saw that, they'll allow some plays downfield. They're going to allow explosive plays. That was a problem. Houston needs a cornerback 3, whether that's Jalen Reed or a player that they may target in the draft. They need stability there, right? And if you can get a late round cornerback, that's great. The cost is going to be low. And with Houston's eye for DBs, Stingley, Kamari, Bullock, Petrie, they're going to find a hidden gem. And they're going to coach them up. And they got the right guys to do it. So that is important to highlight. Thank you for watching today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast, and follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12. Also on Instagram at SomeSportsGuy. Until next time, ladies and gents, Texas fans across the nation, peace.